Hey there friends, and welcome again to the next video in the greenhouse building series. And so I wanted to start this one off just by letting you know this one's going to cover the site location and the foundation. The next one is going to be the frame and the glazing, and then the last one is going to be like venting, heating, cooling, actually growing in the greenhouse, that sort of fun stuff. So let's get started on this one. My credentials. So a lot of people have been wondering why on earth, I feel like I have the ability to teach on this subject. And so I just want to say that about, 15 years ago now, I acquired a certificate in plant and greenhouse science, which was called horticulture, but they changed it. So a certificate in plant and greenhouse science from a local community college. And while I was there, I had some internships and I got some different jobs working through, and for the college, some jobs afterward. And then even after that, I designed and built my very first solar greenhouse on our last house. And so I kind of got a lot of experience not only working in the field, but also having designed and built my own and then working on it myself. So there were some mistakes that we made with the last one, and then there were some things that we didn't necessarily make mistakes on, but could have been improved, some things that we could have done differently to make it even better. And so that's why I'm teaching this series now, is because I do feel like I have a lot of experience in this field. I don't really enjoy trial and error, and so I'm trying to help you avoid that same thing. I don't want you to have to go through trying something and having it fail, especially if you're building something. I mean, to wish you did something differently after you already built it, it can be impossible or very expensive to fix things. So getting it right the first time is incredibly important. And so that's why, again, I just wanted to share this with you. So there you go. There's my background and why I am, going over this series. I really do love greenhouses a ton. And I just want to share that all with you. So for the next 3 videos, I'm talking about the construction itself, but I want to let you know that I'm not going to go through all of the processes of the construction. It's going to be from a basis of somebody who maybe already knows like the basics of construction. That way, when I say, you basically build a stick frame, I'm not going to explain how to build a stick frame, because that would make the video series many, many, many hours longer. So I'm just going to mainly focus on the parts where it's different from traditional construction, things that you would do differently because you're not building a house, you're building a greenhouse, the things that are more greenhouse specific, so stuff like working with polycarbonate or just different things like that. It's assumed when I'm explaining things that there's somewhat of a basic knowledge on construction to start. Here is just a quick shot of what it looks like, still under construction at the moment when I'm doing this video, and it from a distance essentially. Okay, so most greenhouses are in the shape of a rectangle, and they do run with their ridge east to west, and this utilizes super efficient solar greenhouse principle number 1, which is that it has to face south. So facing south means the long edge faces the south. So again, the ridge faces or runs east to west. Again, you can change that up a little bit. You can actually face it slightly southeast or southwest, but no further than that, because we do need it to face as close to the south as possible. That is really what makes the greenhouse the most efficient. It's going to get the most solar heat gain and therefore hold the most heat and get the warmest in the winter months. So this is definitely very important. I mean, there are a lot of different, sizes or shapes of greenhouses. Sometimes they're the dome-shaped greenhouses. I don't know much about those. I do know those are fairly, expensive to build, and so that's probably why I didn't even consider those. So yeah, the rectangle seems to be the best. Or the site needs to have no winter shading. This is very important, and this was a mistake I made with my last one. There was a shed probably 3-4 feet away, and so when the sun would get lower on the horizon, because we're about 40 degrees north here, it ended up with a fair amount of shading, like probably at least half of the wall was shaded. And so I know for a fact it would have gotten a whole lot more solar heat gain, it would have gotten warmer, and it would have been able to heat some thermal mass better if I wouldn't have had that shading. So this is very, very critical. No winter shading. However, some summer shading is actually beneficial. We have there's a greenhouse behind me here, and then there's actually a tree just off to the side here. It's a deciduous tree, so it sheds its leaves, so there won't be a whole lot of shading over the winter, but then in the summer it'll be a lot more shady, and so it'll help keep it cold, cooler naturally. Another thing would be that if it could be protected from the wind if possible. So ours is connected to our house, and there is a house obviously on the right or the north side, and a lot of our wind comes from the north or the west, and our house is sort of an L shape. And so it's actually protected from the wind on both the west and the north. So that's an ideal situation. A greenhouse can lose a lot of its heat when there's a lot of wind. It should be close to water and electricity if possible. So if you have a detached greenhouse, it's okay to have, a hose or extension cords or things like that, but just something that's practical to still be able to run those sorts of, things to, cords and hoses and things. Do keep in mind though that in the winter, it's probably not going to work to run a hose out to it because the hose is going to freeze. So yeah, just keep that in mind. One of the reasons we originally were planning on building this greenhouse just on this side, and we ended up attaching it all the way to the house on my right here, in part because there is an electric socket and there's a hose bib over there. So the fact that there was both water and electric that we would have, connected to it by building the greenhouse a little bigger was a major reason why we ended up making it bigger. So yes, definitely consider that it could use some electricity, just for vent fans, maybe, supplemental lights, those sorts of things. It shouldn't need heat, so you may not need a heater if you follow all of these super efficient greenhouse principles. But you still want, access to some sort of electricity, I'm sure, for just some different other reasons. And of course, obviously, plants need water, so water access is very important. It's okay if the area that you have somewhat slopes, but make sure it slopes toward the sun, not away. This is very important because one of the main things that we're going to use is solar mass, which is principle number 4. It needs the sun to be able to reach the soil, not only for plant growth, but also so that the soil can be warm and therefore hold the heat in the greenhouse overnight. So if you have a sloping, area, it's okay as long as it slopes toward the sun, not away. And so with that, you probably have your site already figured out, kind of pick where you want to put it. I personally love greenhouses that are attached to the house, but detached greenhouses are fine too. Just make sure you pick the right spot for it. And then once you have that all figured out, the next thing to do is to make the foundation. There are several ways that you can do a foundation. If you're doing just a small little greenhouse from a kit, which I've done before, and I still do recommend, maybe a small like Harbor Freight greenhouse kit or something that's fairly inexpensive, they usually just have you put like some treated wood on the ground, and then we just built the greenhouse on top of it. And while that works fine, the best that you're going to be able to get out of that is a 3-season greenhouse, because once the ground starts getting cold, that ground can kind of seep in the cold, and especially once the ground freezes. So the plants that are planted in the ground in the greenhouse, their roots are going to freeze too and therefore die. So a 3-season greenhouse is still fabulous. It's better than no greenhouse for sure. But if your goal is to have a 4-season greenhouse where you can plant plants in ground even and not have them freeze, we have to insulate the ground. This is very, very important. So there are several ways that you can do this. The cheapest way would be to just do some concrete piers and then kind of dig a small channel, maybe even with a trencher or something, which is what we did with ours. We rented a trencher. And then dig a small, channel where you can put some foam board down into the ground in between the piers, and around the entire perimeter. The second method would be to just pour a full concrete foundation, and that's what we were required to do. We had to match the foundation of the house because this is an attached structure. So we had to dig down to the frost line, which is, what I recommend. Further is better, but it becomes more, expensive when you dig further. So at least the frost line, a full concrete footer, and then we insulated it by adding some foam board to the inside and the outside. Actually, let me just show you really quickly, and I'll show you, and then it'll make more sense. Here's a quick clip on what the concrete footer looks like. So here you can see the concrete footer, and here is the foam board up next to it. So we put this on the inside of the greenhouse, which is where I am now, and the outside of the greenhouse, just to really create a really good thermal bubble here. Do keep in mind we're not going to leave it like this forever. We have to, cover this, but we're still in the construction process, and so it's still exposed, and so that's why I'm able to show it to you now. So this is good for several reasons. Not only is it going to keep the greenhouse warmer by insulating the perimeter, it's going to make it so the soil can act even better as thermal mass. It's going to absorb more of the heat, and it's going to hold onto that heat overnight. So outside the soil is very cold, even frozen, but inside it's not frozen, and therefore it's able to release its heat and keep the greenhouse warmer. Installing foam board insulation around the perimeter isn't usually all that expensive. However, it makes a big impact on the greenhouse's temperature. So this is something I definitely highly recommend. If you're building an efficient solar greenhouse, please don't skip this step. Go ahead and insulate around that perimeter with some sort of foam board. There are different types of foam boards that you can get. There's polystyrene and there's different things like that. The foam that we chose was Armax insulation. So if you don't have the Armax brand, just find some other sort of polyiso board that you can insulate, because again, this is another thing you want to make sure is if you're choosing a foam board, you want to make sure that it's one that's rated for below grade, and Armax insulation was rated to go below grade. The other thing that I really liked about it was that it's a high amount of R value per inch. So it has about a 6.5 R value per inch, and so by using a 2-inch foam board, we effectively got an R13 out of it. So if you are choosing to insulate, you'll want to shoot for something like an R10 to 15 for it to be most effective. And then the next thing you want to consider is that you want to stagger the joints. So if you have multiple pieces that you're using together to create the R value that you're looking for, make sure that you stagger the joints so that there aren't, breaks in it, so that it's most effective. Okay friends, so that's it for today's video. Again, stay tuned for the next one where we're going to talk about framing and the greenhouse covering itself, which is really exciting. I'm really excited to share with you where I got these panels from, and I'm really loving them. So I'm excited about next Friday's video. So anyway, thanks for joining me. I'm Frugal Green Girl, and I hope to see you next time. Thanks for watching.